Sopranos Season 2, Episode 17, Birds of Prey. Now, this episode was pretty good. I enjoyed the fact that it was actually a lot about Laurel and her evolution as a character after coming to terms with her sobriety and having to deal with some of the things that came up where she thinks, things are getting back on top. She starts off in sobriety in her second, AA meeting, and she talks about how even though she's gotten to the point where she can, not drink, she is at a point where even though she doesn't drink, she has no idea what to do with herself outside of the meetings she goes to, and that's why, aside from her initial meeting, she has to go to a second one just to occupy her time because she's afraid if I'm here, or if I'm not here, I have no idea what I'm going to do with myself, and that'll most likely lead me to boredom, which will most likely lead me to drink. So I enjoyed that as the beginning of this episode, and then we believe she gets her job back, which I thought was really interesting. And her boss, he says like, you're basically perfect for this job because you knew this person, and so we want you back, and we're hiring you in, and things are looking up for her. And we find out that in this episode, she just was basically bait, and she was tricked into this false position, which wasn't her job until the end of the episode, which was actually really good. But she's getting tricked into this position, and she's actually bait for the Huntress, who has come back for the third time, I believe. And it was really interesting to see her come back, and of course she has the same focus she's always had, which was to get rid of her father, and she will go to any means necessary to do that. And I actually thought this was a good episode with her, and one of the things I found most interesting was when they finally set up the plan and she found out she was being tricked. Excuse me. And she mentioned how she, something her dad told her was, always be prepared. And all these guys just stand up and they start shooting at the cops, and you think they're just random people, but they're working for her. And I thought that would lead into the fact that, she would actually be working with Slade, and she would be the person that, knocked out Diggle. But it turns out that that didn't happen. And if it does, if that is the case, it doesn't really matter now because she did end up getting arrested at the end of this episode. But with it being Slade, he could easily just, do something. I mean, he's got super strength. He has who knows how much money. I'm sure he could easily get her out of prison if he wanted to. But for now, I don't think she was the one who actually knocked out Diggle. I don't think that was one of the many partners Slade, says he has. But it was a good episode, and it didn't focus nearly as much as I thought it would on the Huntress versus the Canary, which it seemed like, it's called Birds of Prey. Obviously, the trailer for the commercial was like Oliver's, current girlfriend and ex-girlfriend, both, vigilantes, really. Well, one's a vigilante, one's really just a murderer. They're just going head to head, and it seemed like the main focus of this episode, but it really had nothing to do with them when you think about it. There were small portions, like the flashback, of course, kind of had to focus on Sarah, because she was the only one there. And then the present really focused a lot more on Laurel than it did the Huntress, because we kind of already know her story, so it was really Laurel's evolution compared to just a fight episode between the Canary and the Huntress. But the small fights they did have, they were pretty cool, and of course, it's always cool to get to see the Canary kind of use the little sonic grenades, which obviously replace her powers in this show. And then the fight that they actually have where Sarah gets tossed out the window, and she uses sort of it's almost like a giant curtain. Initially in that trailer, I thought she just like grabbed a curtain, even though I wasn't thinking like, why would a curtain go that far down? But that's what I was thinking. But she basically just had like a little, it was almost like a magician's trick, and she just did like that, and it came out, and somehow that stopped her from falling, even though that wouldn't really work in real life. It would have to be like an actual plume, pretty much. It would have to be like a parachute, and it was really just a long curtain, or almost like a long sheet, and that wouldn't have slowed her down. She would have just flat out fallen. But it doesn't really matter. It's still a great show. But aside from that, the ending fight they had was really cool too, because my favorite thing is that Sarah, when they come face to face, the Huntress was like, last time we did this, I pushed you out a window, and Sarah says, I was holding back that time. So she let her have it, and she beat her up, and in the end she was definitely gonna kill her. And that was another big focus of the episode. It was dropped in a lot, but I feel like it wasn't the main point, because the main point I feel like was Laurel in this episode. But Oliver was constantly trying to get Sarah to see, like, you don't have to kill every single person, and we don't have to be killers. Like, I'm not anymore, and you don't have to be either. Like, I know we went through stuff on the island, but you know that was years ago. We're past that, and of course she was with the League of Assassins. I would find it to be a lot more difficult for Sarah to kind of change her ways, especially considering the only reason Oliver did is because Tommy died, and it wasn't just like, I'm just gonna stop murdering people. He stopped because his friend died, thinking he was a murderer, and that's why he changed his ways, because they wanted to be better. It's in every episode in the beginning, like, I have to be something else. So it was cool to see that in the end. Her little conversation with Laurel when they were, um, I guess, in the courthouse, it did actually have a tie back to the end where Laurel is about to have a drink because she realizes, like, I was bait this whole time. I'm such an idiot, things like that. And Sarah, as the canary, convinces her, you don't have to do that. I know I'm not your sister, of course, but you can show me that you have the strength not to drink, even though this is a really crappy situation. And she does that, and then in the end, Laurel brings it right back to her, like, show me that you're not a murderer, and she does, and that was a good ending. And one of the other interesting things was with the Huntress, when her father does actually die in this episode. She was, the first thing she said, it wasn't that she was sad or anything. There was no switch like that. It was just that she should have been the one to do it, which I love that. I kind of hate when they just switch at the end, like, I screwed up, I shouldn't have done this the whole time. But in this case, she didn't really switch. She was just mad that she wasn't the one that did it. And she did talk to Oliver, where she mentions, I didn't exactly, I don't feel any different. So it was cool to see her deal with the fact that Oliver was right this whole time, but in that moment she was just like, I should have been the one to do this. So I enjoyed that scene, and also the fact that he died from that one cop who seemed kind of gung ho. I enjoyed that mostly because it made the cop character seem like, or I guess he's not a cop, but sort of like the SWAT guy. It made him seem like he's gonna come back in some way, because I don't know who he is, if he's even a character in the DC universe or not. It's just some random crazy cop who suddenly gets superpowers, because that happens all the time. But in this show, he seemed really, really crazy, and I feel like he's gonna come back because at first it was just normal. It was like, you can kill vigilantes because they're not the law. That makes sense. That just goes with him being a hard ass cop guy. And then the end of the episode, where they know where Laurel is, he tells everyone to stay there, and he just goes on his own, and he's just gonna shoot everyone he can that he doesn't like. So it makes me curious as to whether or not he'll come back as a character. I don't know if he will, of course, but I'd like to see him come back in like a much cooler position, and he's not just you know the rogue SWAT guy, but he's somehow like a supervillain in some way, or like I said, he gets superpowers. I don't know, but I did find his character interesting, and I don't think they put him in this episode as a one-off type of character because of some of the stuff he did, like going off in the end on his own and just disobeying all these rules, even though he could have easily gone with his entire team and said the exact same thing, just kill these people. But he went on his own, so that made me really curious that he might be important sometime in the future. But overall, I love this episode. Like I said, interesting that it wasn't about the Canary versus the Huntress. A lot more about Laurel than anything else, but I did enjoy it. We did get Slade in this. Also, Roy dealing with his powers. Didn't mean to skip over that, but I thought he was doing really well. And like, we got the episode where he was having his problems and stuff. Oliver took him out of the field. Past couple episodes, he hadn't really done much. I thought, oh, he's doing great. He's gonna come back in. He's gonna be rested. He's gonna be mentally sane. Everything's gonna be fine. He goes into the field, ready to kill that guy. Gets shot through the hand. Pulls the guy out the car, about to kill him. Then he almost kills the guy in the club when he bumps into him. And when I saw that scene, that's when I was really like, yeah, he's definitely lost it. And Oliver was right to tell him, leave Thea alone. Because like I said, I thought Roy was doing a fine job, but turns out he just hadn't been put in a situation where he got angry. Or at least we hadn't seen those scenes because, skipping through time. But he's kind of losing control, and of course he pushed it to the extreme to get Thea away from him. And we'll have to see how that plays out, where he either does learn to control his powers or he doesn't. And I think next week will be the episode where he learns to control it because, excuse me, in the end of this episode, Thea's, walking by herself and Slade comes strolling along and he takes her. And of course, the preview does kind of go exactly where you think it is, where Slade kidnaps Thea and Oliver, Sarah, and Roy, they go to confront him. So I'm hoping Roy does have his moment to finally take charge. Like, he is, of course, the one with super strength. Maybe somehow Slade's gonna, take Sarah and Oliver out, even though I doubt it, because the two of them together, I think one could get hit, but that would definitely give the other a chance. But I hope, next week is Roy's time to shine, where he's able to finally show that he has the restraint to, take someone out without just going berserk and destroying everything in his path. So we'll have to wait and see, but this is a great episode, and, for what it was, I really loved it. A great evolution for Laurel. Loved the ending with her where she blackmailed her boss. I thought that was just really cool, and, it was like a cool step up for her. Loved the little bits with Roy kind of learning to control his power, because it does lead to, next week's episode. It's obviously going to be a huge focus because, Thea was his girlfriend, so he's obviously going to have a huge investment in next week's episode, so I'm excited for that. And also really excited that we're getting back to the, flashback. So like I said, in this episode is really, really, piece by piece, Slade needed an engineer for the boat, which never left, so we'll have to wait and see what happened if that guy ends up dying or if he can't fix the ship, and once again Slade kind of loses his mind and just kills that guy. Maybe he'll decapitate him too, who knows. But overall, great episode. Comment below, let me know what you guys thought of it. Favorite parts, least favorite parts. And where do you guys think the past section is going to go? I think everything else, as far as this episode goes, it's, pretty cut and dry. We're going to know exactly how things are going to play out. But how do you guys think the past section is going to go? Because I was thinking in this episode, how long are they going to have the past as a part of, the series? Like, is it going to end? Or are they going to kind of drag it out? Because technically you could have 24 episodes, like the show 24. That show all takes place in one day. They could easily find a way to, to drag it out day after day until those 5 years are gone. And we haven't even seen the part where Oliver leaves the island, because he mentioned, I believe it was last season, I don't think it was this one, he mentioned he wasn't on the island the whole time, so that hasn't even happened yet. So that could be, who knows how far in the future. But, what do you guys think is going to happen in the past next? Excuse me. And how long do you guys think it will last throughout this series? Do you think it'll be permanent, or do you guys think at some point the past, will just stay the past, and then it'll completely be the present? Comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.